So, as I said, I'm a photographer. I've worked with the Sex Pistols, Bob Marley. But before all that began, I was born in Jamaica, and I came to England very young. So the first thing happened to me when I came to England, and it's going to sound very strange to you, but you can imagine, as a child, my early years in Jamaica and the sun and everything. And I remember my mother saying to me that we're going to England. I said, "Oh, where's that?" She said, "Oh, it's quite far away." And, believe it or not, she said the streets are paved with gold, that sort of scenario. So anyway, so we got to the airport. I got on the plane, and the journey was, X hours. And I remember the plane land, and it was in winter, and I turned to my mother to say, "Have we arrived?" And as I turned to talk to her to say that, steam came from my mouth, like, "We're up on fire, we're up on fire." Because I'd never experienced that before, so for me it was really, really strange. And then we were met by my uncle. He had one of these like A1 little cars, pennant cars. You can you imagine all the luggage and everything? We got in there and we drove. And eventually we got to the house and went to bed. Next morning I woke up and there was a TV. And I looked at it and it was switched on. And I was sat down in front of it and it was Watch With Mother. And they said, "Now children, watch 2 and 2. And I said, 4. And she said, "That's right." I said, "Them can hear me. Them can hear me." And I thought, whew, weird place. So this was my beginnings of England, and I was fascinated. Television was the thing that really turned me on. It was a real experience. So you can imagine, basically, as I said, this whole experience of trying to kind of fit into English society as such. So one of the first things that happened to me was that we went to primary school, my cousin and I, because I've got to tell you this, I came with my cousin. And we went to primary school at lunchtime, and we was in a line, and it was, it was bangers and mash. And so, what's this? And at some point, my cousin had disappeared. So there was this whole thing going on. The police were called. He just disappeared. And eventually he turned up with the police. And my uncle said, "So where were you? And he turned and said, "Well, it was lunchtime, and them did have this thing called bangers and mash. And me never like it, so me decided to come home and get some proper food." So that was another scenario. So then all these things, like by the time I got to, primary school and things, I couldn't fit in, and little things I couldn't really understand. There was things like they would say to me, like, when I wasn't paying attention, they'd say, "Morris, pull your socks up." "What are you doing, boy?" And I'm like, and you got a chip on your shoulder, trying to fit in. But one of the things I did, as I said, discover comics. I love comics. And I loved television. And through that, I sort of found myself and just disappeared into my own world. And also at that same point, as I was growing, I joined a choir. And the choir was a very strange choir. It was run by this very eccentric Englishman. It was a Church of England, and he had this vision of all the choir boys wearing Eton suits. And it was the benefactor to the church was a man called Donald Patterson, who basically he was a inventor and manufacturer of photographic equipment. So the height of the choir, there was 80 black kids wearing Eton suits, and we looked really quite weird, but we were really tough kids. And one of the things that Mr. Patterson did was he created a photographic club for the choir boys, and that's how I discovered photography when I was 9. And from the moment I saw the process of photography, I remember one day I wandered into the darkroom and saw one of the older boys printing a photograph, and I looked over his shoulder, and he put the paper on the enlarger, switched it on, X seconds, took it, put it into this dish and rocked it, and I saw this image appeared, and I knew from that moment on I wanted to be a photographer, and I was completely smitten. So I literally spent every single moment as I was growing just taking pictures of my surroundings, everything around me. If it moved, I clicked. And I had this reputation in the neighborhood of being like, this kid is really good and really, really cheap. So that's how I was saying where, again, I kind of was able to buy equipment and, develop my skills. So what I'm going to do now is take you through a journey through my experiences. The book, which is titled Growing Up Black, which is images taken throughout my childhood, from the late 60s up to the late 70s, giving a real insight into the living conditions, the life of the black community. So here now, this particular picture, this is taken of a sound system. And as you can see, the sound system was a very, very important part of the West Indian community. It was a way where when people sometimes, when they bought their houses, in the basement was always empty, and they used to keep blues parties. And what used to happen was that from Friday, Saturday, there'll be parties. And what used to happen, the police used to come along, and they say, oh, no, it's so-and-so's birthday. Oh, it's so-and-so christening. Oh, it's a wedding. So every weekend there was always these weddings and christenings and these parties going on. And the police never really knew what was going on. But if you can see on the left there, with the guy standing, that's the bass bin. Where he's got his arm, that's the amp. And then you've got the mid-range and the tweeters. And that man there, you would call that's the MC. So that's the guy behind the mic going, yeah. And this is what you call a selector. He's the man that would be selecting the music to be played. But there were certain rules in the sound system in the basement of the house. It was always quite dark. And there were certain rules. One of the rules were that you never stood in a man's shoes. If you stood in a man's shoes, it would kick off. Because we were very, very proud, in the sharp suits, and our shoes are very, very special. So if you stood in a man's shoes, problems. The other thing is, you never ask another man who came with his girlfriend or wife for a dance. No, you just don't do that. And the other thing is this, that you would never ask the selector or the MC to change the tune. So these are the rules. But in all of that, there was a most amazing atmosphere. It was packed out, one little red light, everybody be enjoying themselves. It's a way for us, for our parents to kind of communicate, talk about the week, what went on, the hard life they had, what was going on in Jamaica, etc., etc. This next image now is the living condition at the time. As you can see, there's 3 kettles and a paraffin heater. Because at the time when our parents came, there would be signs that said, no blacks, no dogs, no Irish. It's very difficult for people to get homes. So what you'd have in a house, if it's like 3 floors, on each floor, maybe 3 or 4 rooms, and there'd be a family in each room. And there'd be a cooker on the landing. And there you'd share the cooker to do your cooking, etc. But you would start off your meal maybe in the bedroom on the paraffin heater. So you'd have all these kettles, one kettle maybe for the baby, one kettle for something else, etc., etc. Here is another look at the living conditions. But the other thing that you've got to notice is this, that with all this, what was going on, we're very, very proud, very sharp. If you look at the man, the hat, the suit, ready for the party, we're always dignified, always very, very sharp. Here, this is taken in Hackney again, but when you look at this image, this could be somewhere, it could be a war zone, it could be anywhere now, But at the time, what was happening, that they were knocking down all the houses to create the council blocks which came up, which created another problem, where through that there would be like a front line was created. Here, this was taken in a place called the Black House, which was run by a man called Michael X. And Michael X was this notorious prophet as such, who was England's answer to Malcolm X. He was given quite a lot of money by John Lennon, in a region of £1 million. And he had this way of trying to bring us over into black consciousness. But I'll be sitting there because at the same time when I took this image, I was still in the choir. And he'd be talking about the white man's a devil and the black, this. And I'd be sitting there thinking, it's not really the way I see things. Mr. Patterson is cool and, that kind of thing. But, and I was kind of living this double life, all this going on, going from this, going back to the church, and then standing there singing, like, Longwood Christian soldiers, and then going there and listening to Michael X giving his hatred preaches and things. And then here now you've got the handshake. Now, at the time when we did this shake amongst ourselves, if it was in front of white people, we'd be like, wow, black power, man, serious dudes, Or even amongst black people, like, yeah, brother, right on, serious dudes. But now this shake has become a symbol of unity between a black friend and his white friend, or two white guys do it. Everybody does it now, but at the time, it was really quite a serious thing to do. Quite amazing how things evolve, when by the time people start to understand the meaning of things and it becomes something else. Now here, this was during a time of apartheid, and for me is like the power of photography. And, for me, when I took the photograph, I knew what I was doing. But if you look at this picture carefully, what you'll see is what I sensed was it was during the time of apartheid, and it was one of those political rallies. And if you look at the black guy, he's looking at the white guy saying, it's all your fault, mate. It's all your fault. And the white guy, yeah, but I'm with you, man. I'm with you. Can you see it? There's that tension between them. Now, photography has that power. If you use it properly, and you can see what they call with the third eye, you can pick up something which is there, which is not obvious in that sense. Here is a shot that I took of a young kid in the black house. And again, it's the power of photography at the time when it was taken. Little did I know how meaningful it would be in a time for now where you've got so many young black kids, black on black, killing each other. So it's almost like foreseeing what's to come. Okay. So now we're going to get to kind of like the fun bit for me in some sense, because, as I said, I went through, came to this country, discovered photography, and, finding myself. And part of the process was this man. And I knew I wanted to be a photographer. And I kept taking pictures, developing my skills, and eventually I read that this man was coming called Bob Marley. Now, Bob Marley within the West Indian community was the head, the man, and I read he was coming over. So I decided, I bunked off school, went down to a place called the Speakeasy Club and waited, and eventually he turned up. And I walked up to him and I said, could I take a picture? And he said, yeah, man, come in. And he invited me into the Speakeasy Club, and they were doing their sound check. And I was taking pictures of him, and and he was asking me what it's like to be a young black kid in England, and I was asking him what Jamaica was like, and he told me about the tour, and he said if I wanted to come, and I said yeah. So went home next morning, packed my sports bag, went to the hotel, jumped into the back of the transit van, and the tour began, and my adventure began. And that's how everything began for me. And Bob Marley told me and instilled in me that I could do anything I wanted. I could be what I wanted to be. And he was the most incredible man. He really was. I had the most amazing time with him. And one of the things happened was like about 3 or 4 days into the tour, because Island Records were trying to break him into the rock world. So they sort of put him into venues such as like in Leeds and Blackpool, in the Mecca halls, which were capacity maybe 2,000 people. But no one knew him within that rock circle. So maybe 200 people turn up. But Bob always walked on as if it was sold out, and he'd just play like it was a sold-out gig. Because for him, that 200 would become 4, would become 6, would become 8, would become 1,000. He was committed. And one morning we woke up, and it was in winter, and it was snowing. And he opened and said, "Oh, what that?" So I said, "It's snow, Bob." He said, "What do you mean snow?" I said, "You know snow." He said, "No, man, a Babylon this. We have to go home, we have to go home." And Peter just said, "Yeah, man, make leave Babylon and go home. So I said, "But it's only snow, Bob, it's only snow." He said, "No, man, Babylon, we have to go out with Dennis, man. Shut up, I'll go home." And they went home. After thousands of pounds were invested in them, they went home. And it was amazing. So I went home. Where you been? 2 years later, they came back and they played the Lyceum. Now, the Lyceum was the gig of gigs. That's the gig that made him. He came back determined to conquer, and conquer he did. But one of the things happened, I remember the Lyceum, it was absolutely sold out. Because of what I said earlier, that 200 became 4, became 6, word is spread, it was sold out. One of the things happened was, it was so packed that the body heat, the steam, it rose up, hit the ceiling, and it was like, it was raining. Everyone went, "Jah!" No one could believe it. It was unbelievable. And he played this most incredible gig. So here now, this is, again, part of my beginnings of him. And one of the things that Bob did was, he was testing me all the time. He was the most amazing man, as I said. He was always testing me. And I remember one of the things that happened for me was, eventually he knew that he wanted me to work with him and to be with him. So I was invited to Jamaica, and it was the most amazing story. What happened was, I got to Jamaica, and arrived, and then a few days later, he took me to this journey up into the hills. And we walked up in these hills, and we walked, and there was all these rastas, and they were like the most serious-looking rastas you can believe. Locks down to literally down to the floor, eyes were blood red. And I walked into this hut, and they were sitting there and they were chanting, and like, dun, 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 doom, 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 boom, boom. And I'm sitting there looking around, and they built this pipe, soaked the pipe, and boom, and they went, so, ooh, went round, It came to me. So, ooh, yeah. Came back to me, and then, yeah. Came around again, came back to me, and then suddenly I heard, bong, bong, bong. And I said, "Do you hear the bells?" They said, "What bells?" I said, "Don't you hear the bells? The bells." I said, "What bells are they talking about?" I said, "The bells. Can't you hear the bells? Bong, bong, bong." I said, "The bells, don't you hear the bells?" He said, "What bells, man? What do you want?" They looked, and I walked out, and X hours later, they found me sitting on this ledge looking out. And I came back to London, I saw my friend, said, "I know it, this is it. Everything is clear to me now." And you know what? It really was. And through that, Bob came back to London, and we were sitting together, and he said to me, "Let me show how to be free, Dennis." I said, "Yeah." And he just got up and went like that. 3 shots. And the thing about it is this, it was really that moment with him in Jamaica, what happened, why I was able to capture those shots. All it was 3 frames. And from then on, everything I did with him was simple. Nothing was ever posed. I never did any shots of Bob in a studio, any shape or any time. It was always just as it came. This was at the Rainbow. This was at Lyceum. This now, I'm going to tell you the tragedy of this shot is this, that on this tour he was doing in Europe, and basically what happened was, it was his day off, and he was playing football, and somebody tackled him and took out the nail from his big toe. And I never really knew the importance of that shot. The next day, he went to Paris, and he was doing the sound check. The toe was bandaged. And months later, the toe wouldn't heal, would not heal, became cancerous, and that was the injury that basically killed him. And this is the last shot I ever took of him. I met him, he came to London. Didn't realize how ill he was, and he was on his way to Germany for the operation. And I sat with him, and it was really quite sad because that energy, everything had gone from him. And he sat there and eventually picked up the guitar and he played this song to me. And I didn't realize, but it was a redemption song. And I'm probably one of the first people to hear the song, and he played it to me. And I thought, wow, what a beautiful song. And then I left, he left, and he left. And that's how it all began. And that's how, I like to say that I've had an incredible journey, and I shared it with you tonight. If I had more time, I could probably tell you a lot more. But here we go. Enjoy yourself.